Hello and welcome to the Euranet Plus Politics debate. During the lockdown, we are talking to politicians, citizens, and journalists about the big issues during the coronavirus pandemic. This week, as we're getting closer to summer, we're going to be talking about tourism and the pandemic's effect on the travel industry. My name is Dave Keating, and today I'm joined by lawmakers and business representatives to talk about this very timely subject. I'm joined by Hungarian MEP István Ujhely
Good afternoon.
from Good afternoon. He's joining us from Budapest. He's from the center-left S&D group. Then I'm joined by Spanish MEP Jose Ramon Bauza Diaz. He is joining us from Mallorca, and he's part of the Renew group.
Hello, how are you?
And then finally, we're joined by Tom Jenkins. He's CEO of the European Tourism Association, and he's joining us from London.
Good afternoon.
So this week, the discussion about tourism has really kicked up a notch. And I think that's because tomorrow is May 1st. And this is usually a time when people would start planning their summer holidays. But right now, whether or not people are going to be able to travel over the summer is totally unclear. We've been getting really conflicting signals from lawmakers. For instance, Commission President Ursula von der Leyen first said people should not plan holidays this summer, and then she later walked that back. And the reason lawmakers are being very hesitant to tell people they just shouldn't travel this summer is because tourism is a big industry in Europe, and the economic impact of people not taking vacations could be very severe. Tourism is 10% of European economic output and represents something like 12% of employment here. So politicians are talking about how tourism could be allowed in a limited way, in a safe way that would strike a balance between protecting the tourism sector and also keeping people healthy. Now, the OECD anticipates that 45 to 70% decline in the tourism economy. This would amount up to a loss of up to 400 billion euros. It's a huge amount we're talking about. It would put 10 million European jobs at risk. And it's not just a short-term problem, because if European tourism businesses collapse this summer, then they won't still be there for when people feel ready to take vacations next year. So this could have a real impact on this huge sector in Europe for many years to come. And the particularly difficult element of this for Europe is that unlike other places, like say the United States, Europe is made up of many small to medium-sized countries that have borders between them. And right now those borders are closed in exceptional Schengen suspensions. The big question is whether or not those borders are going to be open again in time for summer, because a lot of people here, when they travel abroad, especially if they live in Northern Europe. They need to go down to the south if they want to have some sun or some nice beaches. So those border closures are a big element. And of course, the other element is, even if the borders are reopened, will people be able to get on planes? That's a whole other debate, because the airlines say they're really in danger of bankruptcy here. They've been asked now for a total of 26 billion euros in bailouts from governments. And those governments are also looking at ways to protect them from fallout. The big debate we're seeing this week is whether airlines should be able to offer customers only vouchers, time-limited vouchers, instead of giving them refunds, which is normally required under EU law. Now, we're expecting an EU strategy on this in the coming 2 weeks, but in the meantime, there's a lot to talk about here. So let's throw it out to the panel. Tom, I want to start with you. What is the current state of the tourism industry in Europe, and what are the really acute problems that the tourism sector is facing?
Well, I mean, I think you've given us a brilliant summary of the situation. The situation is effectively simple. There is effectively no demand for any product in any of the European countries which constitute the primary markets for Europe. People are simply not allowed out of their homes, let alone going traveling. The second problem we've got is there's no product. There is nothing to sell. The hotels are closed at the moment. The attractions are closed at the moment. Most of the means of communication and transportation, certainly the public means of transportation, are not functioning. So if you're in the tourism business, you're in a unique position of having nothing to sell and no customers. It's a bit like running an ice cream parlor with no ice cream and nobody to buy it. You're not in business. And so the situation places an existential threat to virtually every player in the European tourism industry.
Now, Jose Ramon, sorry, I was just going to turn to Jose Ramon. He's in Mallorca, and that's obviously a very popular tourist destination, as are a lot of places in Spain. So Spain is one of these southern countries that's very concerned about this effect. What kind of effect could it have on the Spanish economy if people stop traveling this summer?
Yes, first of all, we have to know what about some figures, just for you to know. Tourism in Spain represents more or less 11% of the total GDP, and there's a million people who is employed in that issue. And with this COVID outbreak, we think that the sector of Spain could lose up until 90,000 million euros in this issue. And in fact, we have to know that one of the things that help us to Spain, as well as Portugal, Italy, or any other countries, to get out of the crisis of the 2008 was specifically by the help of the tourism. But in this moment, tourism is one of the most affected sectors that we have then. That is very, very, very important that we have to transmit to people, for example, in Spain, that flying to Spain, being in Spain, is as safe as any other country in Europe. And it is very, very important for them to know that you have said before, some politicians has speech in not the best sense in the last weeks. Ursula von der Leyen was one of them, sadly, but fortunately later she changed the point of view. But this week as well, the commissioner from the German government in tourism, he has told the citizens from Germany, the German people, not to fly to Spain, and this is very, very unfair. First of all, because Spain is as fair and is as safe as any other country, and this is just the opposite. This populistic narrative doesn't have any sanitary criteria, and in fact, this is against about what European means. Europe means, because the feeling, the main important thing in Europe was the freedom for the movement of people, for goods and the services, and tourists is the movement implies the movement of people and the services. That goes directly against the European project. That finally, Spain is as safe as any other country, and that's the thing we are doing here. And you have to know the figures of the death people and infected people in Spain is decreasing every day.
Well, as you say, I mean, tourism is a kind of international game by nature, especially in Europe, where people travel abroad so much. And so we're really trying to search for European solutions. And both of you, the two MEPs, you're both on the European Parliament's Tourism Task Force. Istvan, tell me about what the Tourism Task Force and the European Parliament in general is really expecting in terms of how the EU can coordinate a return to somewhat of a tourism sector being allowed this summer?
We are a European institution which has lots of members, political members. It means different political parties from different member states. That's why together, politicians, I think we have to organize political lobby for the European tourism industry and for the about 20 million people who are working in the European tourism. So I think, of course, we have some kind of co-decision mechanism with the European Council if we would like to make a decision about the budget, and we have to, because we need more money to support the European tourism in the future. But for example, we had to make decisions about the airport slots, and every week we have new important discussions. But the most important, to organize some kind of lobby to make a pressure to take the governments under pressure, and also the Commission. And I think we have three very important things to do now. First of all, this time we have to put the European tourism on ventilator. It means the European tourism companies need money, support, money, not 2 years later, not 7 years later, no, right now, because they have to survive. And after that, we have to rebuild the tourism. We have to open the borders. We have to create this year. We have to create new tourism smart solutions. And finally, the third thing is we need a long time new strategy in Europe. How can we rebuild and how can we keep the European tourism as the best destination all over the world? So that's why we are working.
You mentioned these smart solutions, and one of the ideas kicking around out there is if it's still necessary to keep borders closed this summer, then there's two possibilities there. One is that people take domestic vacations, go to places in their own country, being called staycations. And the other possibility is opening up these so-called tourism corridors between specific countries. Tom, let me turn to you. I mean, it strikes me that neither of these solutions will help the countries that really depend on external visitors mostly for their tourism, right?
I think you're quite right. I think the big problem we have, frankly, with all these measures is that a partial lifting just simply doesn't work in tourism terms. Nearly every tourism business has high fixed costs. These fixed costs are offset by maximizing capacity, and you cannot run on 50% capacity. The airlines have made it fairly clear they can't do so. And I think most other tourism businesses would fall into that category. So the idea of a partial lifting is to allow businesses to open up only to guarantee that they will fail. So this is not much of a solution. I think, sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to put it to Jose Ramon, because Spain is a country that has a lot of international tourists. If the only solution that you were offered were to be that Spain would have to set up travel corridors with specific countries, in your mind, should that be with the countries where with a very heavy load of tourists coming in, like say the UK and Germany, or should that be coordinated by the countries that are at the same stage of infection rates?
Well, I agree with the proposed by Croatia about the tourism corridors. I think it's a good idea. But anyway, for me, it's more important that it's okay. But for me, it's most important to build trust and security for people, citizens, and they don't have to be afraid of flying. And if we don't ensure that, they will prefer to stay at home than flying. And this is what we have to do. The opposite. For example, in the last Trump committee, Mr. Breton came to explain us something, and one of my advocates to him was to plan a new strategy that, in my opinion, is like a Europe brand that we have to propose. That people they don't have to think just in their countries, because for us, Europe is more than 27, 26, 28 countries in the last year. We had the whole body. When we had to develop a tourism policy that encourages travelers to leave the borders of member states by giving trust and security. And for me, this brand Europe is a very, very important issue, because we have to give confidence and security to travelers. And if we just stay at home thinking that we are in our own country, what we are doing is make Europe smaller. And we have to believe that being at home is being in Europe, and is, as I said in the previous question, it's as safe to be in Germany, in Holland, in Poland, and any other country as to be in Spain, in Italy, in Portugal, and in Greece, because we have to open mind, and we have never before a special touristic strategy in Europe. And we have, unfortunately, with this situation, but if we think in positive, we have to believe that we had the first step to create a specific tourism strategy for the whole Europe, and not just for thinking in one country.
Well, yeah, you mentioned that people need to feel safe enough to fly in order
Absolutely.
for tourism to pick up. And there's two big hot debates there as we're waiting for some kind of EU recommendations for people to get back onto planes. One element is what the airline should be required to do this. Should they be required to keep seats empty between people, have social distancing on planes? Should they be required to take everyone's temperature? And the other thing is keeping them afloat. Of course, they're asking for bailouts, and there's this debate over whether or not they should be made to refund passengers, which is the normal rule, or if they should be offering time-limited vouchers, which keeps the money with the airlines and then also maybe encourages people to fly this year when they might otherwise be hesitant. It's fun. Let me put those two questions to you in terms of helping the airlines and helping people to feel safe again to fly. Do you think that the EU should come out with strict instructions on, say, social distancing in airplanes, or would that really inhibit the return? And also, what's your take on this vouchers issue?
Oh, too many questions. First of all, the UN World Tourism Organization created a good campaign, and the main message is to stay at home, to travel tomorrow. And it's very important because we need a good solution, but if we will start earlier than it's possible, it means we will have more problem later. So I think, which is the most important question, to have a coordinated solution. It isn't possible if Mallorca will open the borders and will create some kind of good example how the beaches, how the hotels, the restaurants will be safe for us as tourists. But if those people who will travel there don't have the same situation at home, then it means Europe will have a bigger trouble later. So the main message is we need coordinated, secure and safe solution here in the European Union. And it is the answer again, when we are talking about the passengers, for example, on airplanes, we need the same coordinated solution everywhere, because it's not good if one of the companies will use one way, one example, the other one will try to do something else. It's not good this time. So first answer is yes, I agree. And you have to know that the tourism and the transportation issues are together in the European Parliament. So when we are talking about transportation, it's important for the tourism. And the transportation, the transportation committee, the Trans committee, work a lot with the Commission to find the best solution. And the second thing about the culture, yes, maybe Jose Ramon also supports it. I support it because we need these companies. If we will lose our air companies, if we lose our coach companies, then who and how can we travel in the future? So we have to help them, we have to support them, not because of the companies, because of the workers, the jobs, and because of the big tourism business.
And finally, a quick question for Tom. We've been talking mostly here about travel within Europe, but of course, a big part of the European tourism sector is travel from outside Europe, particularly destinations like the United States, like China. For the moment, the citizens of those countries are not able to enter the EU's Schengen area. Do you think there's any possibility that non-Europeans will be able to visit the EU this summer?
I think this summer is going to be very tight. I think everything is contingent, as everyone has pointed out, on the ability to fly on an aircraft. If they can solve that problem, and if Europe is open, then there is big pent-up demand. I mean, my members, particularly in the United States and even in China, are saying that there is no shortage of inquiries coming through. There's no shortages of bookings for 2021. And when we did a survey of our members last week, we asked them what they thought the prospects for recovery in the American market was. And 75% said that we should expect nothing before 2021. But 25%, which is a significant minority, said that we should anticipate business coming back in the fourth quarter of the year. So really September, October, November. There is a possibility something like that will occur. But
So a possibility for the autumn, but not for the summer.
But the politicians have got to start concentrating on the economy rather than just the health of the nation as a whole. The health of the economy is going to be the issue coming up, and it will overwhelm our current concerns.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. We certainly will be looking keenly at what comes out of both the European Parliament and especially the European Commission in terms of a tourism strategy. I want to thank all of our guests for joining us this afternoon, and thank you also to the viewers at home. We'll be with you again next week for another politics debate. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Viszontlátásra.